Elizabeth Báthory, the Blood Countess of Hungary legend, horror and the truth behind the world's most prolific female serial killer. At the heart of Central Europe, in a crumbling castle perched above the Carpathian forests, a tale of terror took root, one that would echo down the centuries and inspire countless legends of vampires, witches, and monsters. Her name was Elizabeth Báthory, and history remembers her as the Blood Countess, a woman accused of torturing and murdering hundreds of girls whose only crime was their youth and beauty. But how much of her story is truth, and how much is nightmare? Shadows over Countess Castle. In the late 16th and early 17th centuries, Hungary was a land torn between empires, battered by war, and haunted by superstition. Castles dotted the landscape, their stone walls hiding secrets and stories darker than the forests that surrounded them. Of all these fortresses, Countess Castle was the most feared. There, Elizabeth Báthory, a noblewoman of immense wealth and power, ruled her estates with an iron hand. The peasants whispered her name in fear, and even the highborn avoided her company after dark. Yet, to the outside world, Elizabeth was every inch a lady, educated, fluent in Latin, Greek, and German, and renowned for her beauty and poise. She married Ferenc Nadasdy, a decorated soldier, and managed vast lands in his frequent absences. But behind the castle's thick walls, a different Elizabeth was said to emerge, a woman whose appetites knew no limit. The Countess and her court. Elizabeth Báthory was born in 1560 into one of Hungary's most influential families, related by blood to kings and princes. Her childhood was marked by privilege and by violence. The Bathorys were no strangers to cruelty, and tales of sadism, occultism, and mental instability ran through the family tree like a dark vein. Married at 15, Elizabeth moved to Countess when her husband was stationed there as a military commander. Ferenc was gone for years at a time, fighting the Ottomans, and in his absence, Elizabeth was the absolute authority over her lands. She was aided by a coterie of loyal servants, some of whom would later share, or suffer, her fate. It was after Ferenc's death in 1604 that the rumors grew darker. With her children sent away to relatives, Elizabeth's behavior, always stern, became alarming. Servants vanished. Peasant girls sent to the castle for work were never seen again. By candlelight, villagers claimed, screams could be heard drifting from the castle's dungeons. 3. The murders begin. The legend of Elizabeth Báthory's crimes is as horrifying as it is enduring. According to testimonies gathered at her trial, she lured peasant girls to the castle with promises of work as maids or seamstresses. Once inside, they were imprisoned, starved, beaten, and subjected to unspeakable torture. Witnesses spoke of girls being stabbed with needles, burned with hot irons, beaten until blood ran into the cracks of the flagstones. Some were left to freeze to death in the winter. Others were starved, mutilated, or drowned in icy water. In the most enduring and disputed version of the legend, Elizabeth was said to bathe in the blood of virgins, believing it would preserve her youth and beauty. The number of victims is as contested as the stories themselves. Some estimates, based on confessions extracted under torture, put the number at over 600. Modern historians suspect the true count is much lower, but even the most conservative guesses place the number of deaths in the dozens. 4. The blood rituals, fact or fantasy. The story of Elizabeth Báthory bathing in blood is easily the most famous part of her legend. It's a ghastly image, the Countess pale and beautiful, lying in a marble bath filled with the lifeblood of her victims, her skin glowing with unnatural youth. But there is little contemporary evidence for this claim. Most accounts of blood bathing come from later sources, often written decades or centuries after Bathory's death. The original trial records, while horrifying, focus more on torture and murder than on ritualistic bathing. Some historians argue that the bloodbath story was a product of folklore and propaganda. In a time when powerful women were feared and often accused of witchcraft, it is possible that Bathory's enemies embellished her crimes to make her seem less human. and more monstrous. Still, the truth remains chilling. Dozens, perhaps hundreds of young women died horribly within the walls of Countess. Whether their mistress bathed in their blood or not, she presided over a reign of terror that would echo through the ages. The net closes. As the disappearances mounted, pressure grew on the authorities to act, but Elizabeth's noble status made her almost untouchable. It wasn't until she began preying on the daughters of lesser nobility, girls whose families had influence at court, that the Hungarian king, Matthias II, was forced to intervene. In December 1610, Count György Thurzo, the Palatine of Hungary, was dispatched to investigate. Arriving at Countess Castle, Thurzo and his men claimed to catch Elizabeth in the act: a girl's tortured body, another dying, and still more captives chained in the dungeons. The horror of the scene would haunt even the most hardened soldiers. Elizabeth was placed under house arrest. Her servants Ilona Yo, Dorotia Sentes, and Janos Uivari were tortured and confessed to assisting in the murders. They described a world of cruelty beyond comprehension, and their statements, recorded for the court, sealed the fate of the Blood Countess, breaking the trial and the tomb. Because of her status, Elizabeth Báthory was never put on trial herself. Instead, her accomplices faced swift and brutal justice. They were executed, burned alive, or beheaded. The trial records were preserved, and their confessions, sometimes contradictory, often extracted under torture, became the backbone of the Bathory legend. Elizabeth was walled up inside her castle, confined to a single windowless room. She survived for 4 years, unable to leave her stone tomb, while her lands and titles were seized by the crown. She died in August 1614 and was buried in the church at Countess, a resting place as shadowed as her life. Over the centuries, her legend grew. She became a figure of Gothic horror, inspiring novels, films, and even vampire myths. Bram Stoker sourced some of Dracula's darkness from the tales of her cruelty, and countless stories have cast her as a blood-drinking monster. Seturi, monster or victim? Elizabeth Báthory's name is synonymous with evil, but recent historians have questioned how much of her legend is fact and how much is fiction. Some argue that she was the victim of a political conspiracy, her wealth and independence making her a target for powerful men eager to claim her land. The confessions against her were often contradictory, and some witnesses never saw her commit any crime. It is also true that accusations of witchcraft and sadism were common weapons against noble women who stepped outside traditional roles. Elizabeth was a fiercely intelligent, independent woman in a world that mistrusted both. It's possible, historians argue, that her real crime was being powerful and feared. Still, the contemporary records, letters, testimonies, and the sheer number of missing girls are difficult to dismiss. Whether a monster, a victim, or something in between, Elizabeth Báthory's story is a mirror for the fears and nightmares of her age. 8th. Legacy of the Blood Countess. Today, Elizabeth Báthory remains a figure of fascination and horror. Her castle is a tourist attraction, her life the subject of endless books and films. She is remembered as one of history's most prolific female killers, the Blood Countess, the Lady Dracula, the predator of the Carpathians. But beneath the legend lies a deeper story, of a world where power and cruelty often walked hand in hand, where fear became fact, and where women who defied their place could become monsters in the eyes of history. Was she a sadistic killer, a victim of her enemies, or both? The truth, as ever, is tangled in the shadows, just like the corridors of Countess Castle, where the screams of the past still seem to linger, and where the roses are said to bloom a little redder than anywhere else.